Hi everyone, it's Wazako. This is going to be essentially an entirely unedited and unscripted video. I'm just going to be going over the 5.12 patch notes, Season 21 Part 2. The first thing on the patch notes is the Void event. This is going to be a really strong event where there's going to be a chest event running in the Void essentially the entire time, and then an Exaltation banner and a 1.5x event in the Void. So this is going to be an entirely spam dungeon throughout the event with a lot of probably even full skips going on. There's also going to be a free Void event after the 10th. There's going to be dungeon events happening every week for the next 3 weeks with Spider Den, Parasite Chambers, and the Nest. The next week, Undead Lair, Crawling Depths, Cult, and Moonlight Village. And then the week after that, Cat, Toxic Sewers, Lair of Draconis, Lost Halls, and Cogbold, with Exaltation banner Cogbold, which is really strong. This is going to be a really very good event. There's going to be a lot going on. In the realm, there will be Blooming Flowers, which will drop portals to the Remnant of the Void, which is apparently an easier version of the Void dungeon, which is interesting. I can't wait to see what that looks like. Starting in the second week and running until the end of the event, Beacon Guardians and all encounters in the realm will drop additional loot, which is probably going to be the Remnants of the Void, which you need to collect for quests and the like. The dungeon events, which I just went over. Void Guide in Lost Halls, week 3, so you don't have to rely on Pub Hall's raid leaders to try their best to find the Marble Defender. Void Portal opens, so that's free Voids. Spotlight event, which gives Darkness Inspired and 1.2x Dex boost, which is pretty interesting. Tinted Boss, a tinted version will appear in some of the event dungeons. The boss will have a chance to drop Remnants of the Void and extra loot. Again, interesting that it's chance-wise, but, you know, whatever. It's probably only going to be in the UDLs and stuff like that. Here's the community event. As you can see, this is really strong. You're going to get 5 voided Mighty Quest chests, 7 Mighty Quest chests, 5 voided Epic Quest chests, character slot unlocker, that's probably an 8/8 grave, Lucky Clover, legendary mystery skin, all that, backpack. It's going to be a really strong event for that. And here are the quests. Some of the stronger ones are being able to trade in 80 fragments of the Void, or whatever you want to call that, for an Omni, 60 for any of the Void Archer set, and also you can trade in 60 for any of the Moonlight Village Whites, which is also very strong. Next, the Battle Pass, which I'm not going to go over the entire thing here, but, you know, it's pretty much the same thing all over again. Definitely worth buying if you're playing this game every day or close to it. There's now a maximum of 1.5 million Battle Pass XP, which is, you know, a little sad, but it's whatever. Complete missions related to Void to unlock more rewards, which is, again, basically the same thing as last season, except with more Voids, as you can see, obviously. There doesn't seem to be a seasonal path, which is a little strange to me, but I'm just gonna leave it and hope it fixes itself. There's 6 new shinies added to the game: the Bramble Bow, the Corsair Ring, Jade Storm, the Leaf Dragon Hide Armor, Brain Cube, and the Barnacle Basher. So all of these dungeons are probably going to be run a little bit more. The ST set reskin, which is a reskin of the Plague Doctor ST set. This never been like the most influential ST set, so you can kind of just leave that for what it is meta-wise, but, you know, it's cool to have. The Void Spider Skin box, which is, I assume, a pet skin, but I can't tell really. And then the Void Priest ST set. I think this is probably just a mistake, because, you know, it just said it. So, whatever, right? New enchantments. There's a Crystal Sword enchantment, which basically, if I'm reading this right, just turns it into a sort of the Colossus, which is cool. Crystal Wand, summon small crystals as you shoot that shatter into multiple high damage projectiles targeting enemies. Again, that's probably going to be very strong. The fire 2 bloody claws that inflict high bleeding damage. Probably somewhat strong, but it's a bone dagger, so like how strong could it be? The Platoani robe, adding a quote unquote hefty amount of dex. Interesting word choice. And then the shroud, the one that drops from Thicket, is lightning blasts, which is actually interesting, especially on something like, you know, a wizard with Genesis spell. I want to see what that would look like. Just infinite damage. Unholy spirits, unique weapon modifier, summon stationary spirits that attack nearby enemies while you shoot. I assume this is going to have something to do with Moonlight Village. Other changes, artifacts, which are like the tarot card type things, dropping gold bags, which I like because it was so annoying having ST baits and just getting a tarot card and that's it. The Ivory Heart artifact now additionally increases Draconic Gaze, Awakened mods weight by 10x. Oh, artifacts can now be stored in the Forge chest, which is nice, but, you know, not overpowered or anything. Lowered HP scaling for objectives and minions and Spec Pen, Lost Halls, and Shatters. This was very necessary. Anyone who ran these over the past few patches can tell you this was the most annoying thing, is, you know, making people wait outside or, like, denying people from runs just because they're gonna scale up the minions too hard. Single item blueprints now have collection icons and labels of their original item for forging. And blueprint drops have been added to more locations, which is interesting. Oh, and they apparently reworked the EP Awakened, but I'm not sure what that's going to be like, so I can't really comment on that. They're buffing ores across the board, especially the legendary ore, which is now 60 rare, 30 legendary, meaning you only need 2 other legendary items to be able to craft a legendary. Dust drops have been buffed, which is amazing. Anyone can tell you this is the most like disgusting thing in the last few patches was just having to grind like 80 colts to be able to reroll one item. And then they changed a few of them. Beer God drops red dust, Ghost Ship, Mace Minotaur, Goblin Patriarch, Worlds, Oyster, Daughter of Lyman, Possessed Pumpkin, and Well of Lost Souls now drop red dust, and the Adult Bane Serpent and the Bloodroot Heart now drop purple. Here we're getting on to the item balance. This is more my shtick. Poisons are being buffed pretty much across the board, with the impact damage going up, and for the tier 7, the damage over time also going up. This is true of basically everything. The two I want to focus on, though, are the Murky Toxin, which was previously still the best poison in the game, and I think will be even better after this patch. Well, obviously it'll be better, but it'll be better than it was relatively less patch because they're buffing the damage boost per dex and attack up from 10 and 5 to 10.5 and 8. So if you have a Hirjutene on and an attack ring, because that's usually what you put on your assassin, it's going to be a lot stronger. Not to mention the bomb scaling per dex and attack is also going up. This is going to make assassin a much stronger DPS class. Also, the bottled Metazoan now pierces armor in addition to gaining the pretty much universal 250 buff. This is going to make it, again, a lot stronger, obviously, but it's going to make it meta relevant now, as it really wasn't before. Skulls are also getting a huge buff for Wizmod. I calculated it, and with Shaitan Skull, you can get about 1,000 damage, so that's 500 extra damage just from Wizmod on a Wisdom set, meaning it's going to be a really, really strong patch for Necro, especially if you have Shaitan Skull or tier 7. The leather armors are being buffed. The snakeskin armor and spectral cloth are cool. The only thing is the spectral cloth is a little bit underwhelming compared to something like the Hirjutene. But the one I'm most interested in is the Coral Silk, where it gives you 8 wisdom, meaning stuff like Rogue is going to really love this, even maybe as an alternative to the tier 14 armor, which is crazy because it's just a sea silk. The Woodland Mystic ST or UT set, the Spirit Staff is getting a huge damage buff. I'm not quite sure what it means by the sub attacks. I'm going to go test that after this video is out. The Enchantment Orb is getting a huge buff, where it's now applying Berserk on self, making Mystic, again, a very, very strong class for soloing dungeons. The Woodland Robe is getting a huge buff, where it's going to be some sort of actually viable item for classes that need the dexterity more than they need the attack. And it has a 3% chance to spawn a fairy while shooting, which is abs damage for 100 damage every 0.8 seconds for 6.4 seconds, with a cooldown of 6.4 seconds, which means if you're using something like the Spirit Staff, then you are going to be able to have this up essentially 100% of the time, adding, well, like 120 or something DPS. Fairy Ring is just going to be a ring. It's not going to be special. 3% chance to spawn a fairy while shooting below 80% HP. Heals you 15 HP per second. This is essentially giving yourself the healing buff, but again, Phylactery Mystic ST set. Very strong buff to, well, not really, but it's a change that'll make it somewhat more relevant, especially when used with the rest of the set. Soul of the Bearer, MP cost 100 from 150, cooldown 4 seconds from 6 seconds. Stasis is centered on user within 4.5 tiles, so they're basically just taking the enchantment orb and putting it on this. Applies Speedy and Berserk on self for 2.5, so this is probably going to be used to rush more dungeons, and you won't really need to Snake Eye Ring if you have this. And duration of both effects scales by 1 second every 10 wisdom above 55, and then Ring of the Covetous Har, that's just a ring, and it's not even a very good one. Other items, Bone Dagger, but now it's in a white bag. This is a very interesting change, the Staff of Unholy Sacrifice, which is something I've touched on a little bit before as being a cheater weapon. They're now reworking it to make it not a cheater weapon. The original thought was to make it silence you while shooting. They're not even doing that anymore, and they're buffing it twice. They're making it far forward so you can actually use your abilities while using it, making it more viable in something like Wizard or Necromancer. And they're also buffing the arc gap. They're making it closer together, which is really, really, really strong, because that was the main drawback of the, well, aside from the drawback that you had to shoot backwards, the main drawback of the weapon was that the arc gap was so wide that it was basically an EP. Now it's going to be less like that, and you're going to be able to use your abilities while using it, which means it's going to be super strong. Symbiotic Ripper is getting its base damage buffed by 5, meaning its average damage is getting buffed by 2.5. That's kind of a nothing burger buff, but whatever. Kyukitsuki Togoroshi, the shot at this weapon is now fired backwards, which means it should boomerang a fair distance in front of the player instead of behind, which means, again, like the Unholy Sacrifice, you had to shoot this weapon before previously. Now you're shooting it forward. I think this is going to be a super strong item this patch. The damage is kind of crazy. It's going to be at least used for enemy clear, stuff like that, especially on Ninja and Samurai. I don't know about Kensei, just because of the amount of mobility you have on that character kind of overwhelms this. But for Samurai with a Wakizashi of Crossing Fires, or Ninja with literally any star, it's going to be very, very strong. The Elder Heartwood Staff, this item is gutted. Don't use this item anymore. The Pierce has been entirely removed, the damage has been nerfed, and the projectile speed has been nerfed. This item was taken out back and shot. It's not going to be a good item this patch at all. The Wand of Hidden Knowledge, I assume this is also going to be not a very good item because of they're fixing the bug where it acted as a normal wand. Now it's going to be a burst fire wand, and you kind of just have Morning Stars for that, so it's probably not going to be as good as a Morning Star. Marionette Ravager fires an additional shot every 2 seconds. This shot deals 200 to 300 damage and exposes for 1 second. I'm going to do more research on this item. I'm going to pause the recording. I'll be right back. Alright, I think this is going to be a strong dagger. I think it's probably going to be better than Bone Dagger. I don't think it's going to be best, though. Well, it depends on if the additional shot is, enemy piercing, because that's essentially the perk, is that this pierces enemy, or pierces armor, and if that shot is also piercing armor and exposing, then it's going to be very strong. The Primal Arcana was a really, really strong, as they say, a crutch for Mystic's relevance last patch. And it was super good with Elder Heartwood Staff and the Vigor, which is also being touched on. And they're just making it less reliant on shot speed. And yeah, that's essentially it. They're just buffing the damage and adding a cooldown and adding a proc to fire an additional middle shot that has 0 cooldown. I assume this is still going to be a strong item and probably the best DPS orb on Mystic. The Vigor is being buffed 70 to 85. Festival, this is a huge buff, by the way. People see the chance going down, they're like, oh, well, that's probably not enough to compensate, but the mana cost going down was really necessary. Essentially, this would just drain mana from you while you were shooting, and that's a really bad thing to do. So if you can get like a Legendary or Divine Spirit Staff and upgrade it to a Vigor, it's going to be a very strong staff, maybe even best in slot this patch, but I couldn't tell you that far ahead. Snake Eye Ring. This is really weird that they're buffing this because they're giving it extra speed and a little health and defense, which means it's going to be more usable. I assume they're also changing this to a white bag. The reason this is so weird to me is that everyone had this in their inventory anyway, like even if it was shit. And now they're gonna have it in their inventory, and it's gonna be less shit. Anyway, Captain's Ring, new stats: 50 health, 4 attack, 4 dex, 5 whiz, 5 bit. No, no one's gonna be like crazy about this, but it's gonna be fine. Elegant Parasol, cooldown 4 seconds. That's a nice buff. Ocular Entrapment, damage up by 200. Again, a very, very nice buff. These items are going to be more relevant as they were a little underwhelming before. Expo, 60 health, 60 mana, 5 bit, 5 def. They really want people to take this item, and nobody wants to wear it. Eye being a direct upgrade, if you have this, it's going to be better than Expo, and if you have literally any other ring, it's going to be better than Eye. And then Coral Ring, 90 mana, 5 speed, 5 dex, 5 whiz. Again, that's a pretty good ring for early game for PPEs, but aside from that, you're not going to be wearing it. Fixes. Shuriken should no longer properly apply stat bonuses when swapping or when affected by silence. Many forge recipes that were missing the requirements from the description should now be fixed. STs now require one of their ST type instead of 2. Kyutsugi, Hitogoroshi, and Warp Mantle should no longer lose enchantments, meaning you don't have to worry about taking these items to your vault or nexus anymore. The old tarot card items are now soulbound. I don't really care. If you were a collector, that's probably very sad, but whatever. Tiered items should cost the proper forge fire amount. That's good. Damage resistance modifiers are re-enabled, which is nice. I believe this is Night Shield that they're talking about. Stat mod multiplier enchantment should no longer cause your stat mod to decrease. Projectile and fire rate mods should now no longer cause frequent DCs. That's awesome, because you can actually now use the best enchantments in the game instead of having to be like, oh, do I care about damage or do I care more about DCing from Deca's servers? I hope they actually fix this. Blueprints and ores should now be ignored for forge rarity operations, which is good because they were originally, like, if you put 2 rares in, it was kind of messing up the process. Brian Quiver shows vulnerability in the tooltip again. Fixed a small tooltip error on the Colossus shield. Awakened Doombow. Now you no longer uses placeholder projectiles, which is a sign of a very tested game. And the cavalry lance should no longer DC players when used in specific areas. If anyone knows about this, people would just go on the lance in an 0-3 run and just try their best to close the server using an item that's in the game. Yeah, I'm glad that's not a thing anymore. Anyways, those are the patch notes. I think this is going to be a very strong patch with a lot of very strong buffs, and also the event is going to be insanely broken, so if you aren't in the game, now's a good time to get in, and if you are in the game, now's a good time to spam, essentially, because they're not going to have events this strong until Month of the Mad God, probably. So yeah, it's a very good time to be playing Realm, essentially.